Assalamualaikum and hello madam. I hope you are in a good condition. So now my group will talk about economic sector in Malaysia, which is transportation. So my group have Iliya, Afika Syahirah, Nurmah Ali, Azila, and my name is Puteri Azila. So now I will begin with my part first. Now I will be presenting about energy demand in the transportation sector in Malaysia. First of all, transportation is one of the most important sectors in the country, but it is also the biggest energy user. Right now, it uses around 40% of all the energy in Malaysia. Most of these energies come from petrol and diesel, which are fossil fuels. Because of this, the transportation sector is also a major source of greenhouse gas emission. As our cities grow and more people buy vehicles, the energy demands keeps going up. Unfortunately, the use of clean or renewable energy in this sector is still very limited. That's why it's important for Malaysia to start shifting towards more sustainable transportation solutions. Now we go to energy demand by energy types. Let's look at the types of energy use in Malaysia's transportation sector. Right now, petroleum products like petrol and diesel are the main sources of energy. In fact, they make up about 95% of the total energy used for transport. Petrol is mainly used by private cars and motorcycles. Diesel is mostly used by bus, trucks and other commercial vehicles. There are some efforts to introduce alternative fuels like natural gas, NGV, and biofuels, and even electric vehicles, but they are still at an early stage. The adoption is slow because of high costs, limited infrastructure, and public awareness. So for now, the sector remains very dependent on fossil fuels. Now we go to subsectors in transportation, energy use. Now let's talk about the main subsectors in transportation that use the most energy. The biggest one is road transport. This includes cars, motorcycle, bus, and lorries. It uses about 85% to 19% of all transport energy. That's a huge amount. Next is aviation. Although it serves fewer people compared to road transport, it uses a lot of energy, especially for long distance flights. The demand for air travel is growing again after the COVID-19 pandemic. Then we have marine transport. This includes ferries and cargo ships. It's important for moving goods between islands and ports, especially for local shopping. Lastly, rail transport like trains and LRT is actually more energy efficient, but it still has a very small share in energy use because our rail network is not as widely developed.
Let's take a look at one of the major contributors to greenhouse gas emissions, which is transportation. Transportation includes vehicles like cars, trucks, planes, ships, and trains. These all release harmful gases such as carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide into the atmosphere. These gases play a big role in climate change and air pollution. The type and amount of emissions depend on what kind of fuel is used and the engine type. To address this issue, there's a global push towards using electric vehicles, increasing fuel efficiency, and building more efficient public transportation systems. Let's break it down further by looking at the sources of emissions in more detail. The first one is road transport. Road transport is the biggest source of emissions in Malaysia's transport sector. Most of it comes from cars, trucks, and motorcycles that run on gasoline and diesel. Next is aviation and shipping. Aviation and shipping also produce emissions, especially when it comes to long distance travel and international trade, but not as much as road transport. The last one is other modes. Other modes is like trains and public transport produce fewer emissions, particularly when they use clean energy sources. So, improving transportation is just about convenience. It's also about reducing our carbon footprint and protecting the environment. Now, let's explore how transportation is contributing to climate change in Malaysia. First, looking at the rising CO2 emissions, we can see a sharp increase in transport-related emissions. In 2000, emissions were at 32.2 million tons, but by 2023, they more than doubled to 66.3 million tons. This rise is largely due to the growing number of vehicles and our continued reliance on fossil fuels like gasoline and diesel. Moving on to the dominance of road transport, in 2022, road transport was responsible for a staggering 99.1% of transport sector CO2 emissions. Rail and navigation contributed 0%, while domestic aviation made up just 0.9%. In fact, between 2000 and 2015, road transport made up 97% of emission, and this increased even further to 98% in the years that followed. When we look at the share of national emissions, transport roads is clearly growing. In 2010, the transport sector accounted for 20% of Malaysia's total CO2 emissions. By 2023, this had grown to 23%, highlighting how crucial it is to address emissions in this sector for climate action. Lastly, let's break it down by vehicle type. In 2022, heavy-duty vehicles such as trucks and lorries produced the highest share of road emissions at 56%. Light-duty vehicles like cars and vans contributed 41%, while motorcycles, including 2 and 3-wheelers, made up only 4%. This data makes it clear, if we want to tackle climate change, the transportation sector, especially road transport, must be a top priority.
Even the alternative like electric vehicles and hydrogen fuel cells have emerged, most countries still rely on oil to power cars, ships, and airplanes. This overdependence poses several serious challenges, which I will discuss through 3 main aspects, which is energy security, energy inefficiency, and environmental lock-in. Firstly, reliance on oil, a globally traded and politically sensitive commodity, creates energy security risks. Geopolitical tensions, such as conflicts in the Middle East, can disrupt oil supply chains. These disruptions often lead to a sudden spike in fuel prices, affecting economies worldwide. For example, when oil price surge, it increases transportation costs, raises the price of goods, and puts pressure on national budgets. In addition, these price shocks tend to push countries to produce or purchase more fossil fuels to stabilize supply, which ironically delays the transition to a cleaner alternatives. Secondly, internal combustion engine or ICE vehicles, which dominate road transport, are inherently inefficient. Research shows that ICE vehicles convert only 12.7% of the energy in fuel into usable motion. The rest is lost mostly as heat. In contrast, electric vehicles can reach over 50% of energy efficiency. This means a significant portion of the energy we use is wasted, leading to a higher fuel consumption, increased emissions, and unnecessary pressure on fossil fuel resources. Lastly, the transportation system is deeply locked into the fossil fuel use due to the infrastructure built around it. From road networks to fuel stations and vehicle manufacturing systems, everything has been designed to support fossil fuel consumption. This creates what we call environmental or carbon lock-in. Because so much has already been invested in this system, shifting to clean alternatives like EVs or hydrogen becomes a slow and expensive process. There is also resistance from industries and stakeholders who benefit from the status quo, making change even harder.
Assalamualaikum everyone. So today I'll be speaking about policies implemented by the government. To start off is the National Transport Policy, which was implemented in 2019 and its goal is until 2030. So the purpose is to make Malaysia's transport system more efficient, sustainable and more globally competitive. Thus helps lowering costs, supports industrial growth while also improving national connectivity. Moving on to another one, which is maritime and port development. So this is regarding more ships, and so the purpose is to enhance its ports and the shipping industry, thus strengthening trade. Because of this, it can support Malaysia's export-heavy economy and also reduces shipping delays. So like you guys can get your parcels quicker. And then third one is civil aviation policy. This is regarding cargo ships, aeroplanes, anything that has air cargo basically. So the purpose is to make Malaysia a regional aviation hub. This will increase tourism, makes business traveling easier, and improves logistics through cargo. So moving on to investment in rail infrastructure. This is basically when you guys are still, instead of using a tram, you would use an electric train. So the purpose was to invest more into modern rail systems, and this will be able to move more cargo efficiently and quickly, and it will open more development in rural areas and reduce roadway and pollution.
Moving on to green transport initiatives, which is e-cars. It is part of Malaysia's environmental goals under international climate agreements. This will reduce carbon emissions and create opportunities in the green tech industry for Malaysia. Okay, next we will be speaking about the reasons why these policies are being implemented. So the first point is to increase economic growth. So by having efficient transportation, it can increase productivity immensely. Another point is that it will be able to improve regional and global trade connectivities. This means that by upgrading railways, ports, highways, Malaysia has the ability to strengthen their role as a regional logistics hub. A third one is it can support urbanization and population growth. For example, KL is expanding, growing, and just thriving very quickly. So public transport like the MRT and LRT can reduce traffic congestion and pressure on the roads. Another point is it provides an increase in employment and also supports local industries. So transport infrastructure projects can create jobs in construction, engineering, and also the service sector. Lastly, it can reduce economic disparities between the regions. It is known that East Malaysia and other rural areas have less access to quality transport, so by connecting these regions, the government can create a balance and reduce poverty gaps. That is all from me. Thank you so much.
Hi everyone, my name is Azila. Today I'll be presenting about initiatives implemented by the Malaysian government to improve the country's transportation and logistics sectors. As you can see in the slide, this involves 4 key areas: first land, second aviation, third maritime, and fourth logistics. Let's begin with the first part of initiatives. First part is land. One major effort is the expansion of the rail network, such as the MRT Putrajaya line. This is aimed at reducing traffic congestion, especially in the Klang Valley, which is one of the most congested areas in the country. So next, aviation. Under aviation, the government is focusing on airport modernization. For example, the KLIA Aerotrain replacement project is being carried out to ensure a smoother transit experience for both domestic and international travelers. Next, maritime. In maritime transport, there's an effort to enhance port capacity. A good example is the expansion of Port Klang, which the goal of turning it into regional maritime hub. And for logistics, the government introduced the National Logistic Policy, which is NLP, from 2020 to 2030 to improve supply chain efficiency, to making it easier for goods to be moved quickly and cost effectively. Next, let's look at the second part of the initiatives. Apart from rail, the government is also improving highway infrastructure. The Pan-Borneo Highway, for instance, aims to connect Sabah and Sarawak more effectively, enhances connectivity in East Malaysia. For aviation, to boost regional connectivity, upgrades are being made to airports in Kota Baru and Sandakan. This supports domestic travel and improves accessibility to less connected regions. In the maritime sector, the government is supporting in shipbuilding and ship repair, which is SBSR industry, particularly in Johor. This helps strengthen the local shipbuilding capabilities and encourages growth in maritime-related industry. Last but not least, for logistics, infrastructure for e-commerce delivery is being improved. A good example is the Digital Free Trade Zone, DFTZ, near KLIA, which enhances logistics support for online businesses and international trade. To conclude, all these initiatives show the government's commitment to building a more connected, efficient and competitive Malaysia. By focusing on all 4 sectors, land, aviation, maritime and logistics, Malaysia is setting a strong foundation for sustainable economic growth and better quality of life for the rakyat. Thank you for listening.